This is how it acts. The main mechanism is it increases acetaldehyde, and that leads to the disulfiram ethanol reaction. And when that reaction occurs, the nausea, the vomiting, the uneasiness probably prompts the patient not to drink. Supervised disulfiram is what is recommended in alcohol dependence. We usually ask a relative to see that the patient takes the drug on a day-to-day basis. However, there are a large number of limitations when it comes to studies done on disulfiram, because unlike naltrexone or acamprosate, where you can do double-blind studies, you can do placebo trials, you can't do that here because the patient has to know he's on disulfiram. So most of the studies are open studies where the patient is aware. So people feel the results sometimes can be biased. Apart from that, also, what one of the psychopharmacologists has reported is that naltrexone acamprosate as a molecule is preferred in the pharma world because cost-wise it's more beneficial to them. Disulfiram is much cheaper molecule, and funding for disulfiram trials is very difficult to find, particularly in the United States. Hepatotoxicity with disulfiram is also another problem which we face, and it's quite common. So any patient with elevated LFTs, elevated bilirubin, we're a little cautious when it comes to giving disulfirams. There are very few studies on head-to-head comparisons on disulfiram, though we have Indian studies available, some of which is my own work, which I'll just present briefly. Disulfiram has been shown to be superior to naltrexone, has been shown to be superior to acamprosate, and there is a study which says that a disulfiram acamprosate combination works better than disulfiram alone, or works better than acamprosate alone. And disulfiram has also been shown to be superior to topiramate. Though, we don't have large studies. This was the first study which we had done where disulfiram and acamprosate was compared. Then we had another study where we compared naltrexone and disulfiram, and the third where disulfiram and topiramate were compared, and in all these studies disulfiram was found to be superior. We also did a first study where disulfiram and naltrexone were compared in adolescents with alcohol dependence, where again we found disulfiram to be superior, and we also used it in elderly patients. So across all age groups we did find disulfiram superior. There are some other studies which we're doing where we're trying to use a disulfiram acamprosate combination. Maybe time will tell us how good it is. Critical issue in disulfiram is a side effect profile and your patient choice. Sometimes if you choose the wrong patient, he may drink on disulfiram, bear the reaction, sometimes have a very severe reaction, and then land up in an ICU, land up in an emergency ward, and that causes a little bit of hassle if you're only in a private setting. In a hospital setting, yes, it is more manageable. Consent issues. Patient has to consent. You can't give him disulfiram behind his back. Not advisable. You'll have to probably take his consent, make him realize the drug, make him realize the side effects. Sometimes patients refuse and you can't force disulfiram down their throats. Hepatotoxicity, another problem. And skin rash. Around 10% of patients who use start disulfiram develop this fixed drug reaction. It goes off with antihistaminics, but then they are reluctant to start disulfiram again. What worries us more is a patient who has suddenly come out of delirium, suddenly come out of a bad withdrawal, you start disulfiram, and he develops psychotic symptoms. This is seen in around 1% of patients, not many, but nevertheless, it's worrisome, and a patient who's been through a disulfiram-induced confusion or psychosis won't take the drug again. There is also a little bit of fear with disulfiram usage when we explain it to the relatives. They're a little worried about the drug, its effects. And acceptability worldwide is limited in some quarters because of these issues. Coming to topiramate, though it is not US FDA approved, it has been recently gaining mileage in alcohol dependence because again, like acamprosate, it has a mechanism of action which is threefold. It acts on multiple neurotransmitter systems and it reduces reduction in drinking days and abstinence rates are increased. Now, topiramate, for many of you who don't know, it was marketed by Janssen first, tried by Janssen first as an oral hypoglycemic agent. It failed there and then they found that it has anti-epileptic potential. And it worked as an anti-epileptic very well, and then people started using it in alcohol also. Though we need further studies, we don't have enough data as of now. Well, there are some future agents which are being tried. There are some reports of sertraline, escitalopram, fluoxamine being used in alcohol dependence. On one hand, we say SSRI has GI side effects, so the propensity to cause GI side effects is probably more in an alcohol patient who already has these issues, but still there are studies done there. There have been some studies of ondansetron, which is known to prevent relapse in alcohol, though not much data available. There are studies on levatiracetam, carbamazepine, noxcarbazepine. There are studies in the 80s on haloperidol, though antipsychotics in any alcoholic patient will have to be used with caution. Gabapentin, I think similar to its benzodiazepine action, working on GABA, there have been long-term studies, and divalproate. All these studies have had relapse rates of, abstinence rates of around 30 to 40%, which I feel, with most of these drugs, normally abstinence rates are 30 to 40%. It's a little difficult to question whether these abstinence rates would have even otherwise occurred, or whether it's due to the drug. But still, that's what most studies say. I even found some studies where clozapine and olanzapine have been used, and these are not in alcohol-dependent psychotic patients. These were pure alcohol dependence patients with not much effect. Amisulpride and tiopride, because of their actions on the dopamine system, have been implicated in long-term management of alcohol also, with some studies on fluphenthixol. To conclude, before I go into the psychosocial management, we still have a lot to sort of finish in the clinical aspects. We don't really know much as far as the long-term pharmacotherapy goes, because we still are not sure as to how do we decide which drug to use. It's very difficult to decide which drug to use because there is no patient-specific marker available, that he's a patient that will respond to disulfiram, he's a patient that will respond to naltrexone, he's a patient that will respond to acamprosate. No. Does combination therapy work? It's again a question which has not been answered. Does disulfiram plus naltrexone work, or does acamprosate plus naltrexone work? Does topiramate plus acamprosate work? We really don't know. In fact, we don't have head-on studies. Most of the studies are placebo-controlled. We need head-on trials where one drug is compared to another. And we need clinical-based studies. So alcohol dependence plus MDD, alcohol dependence plus psychotic features, what we normally see in practice. Most of the studies use pure alcohol dependence. So again, we don't know how they are good. And usage of all these drugs in dual diagnosis patients, whether they have the same efficacy compared to pure alcohol dependence. Also, whether female alcoholics, particularly when it comes to disulfiram and naltrexone, owing to the differential effects of the female liver on alcohol metabolism, whether we need to change dosage, change regimens, we don't know. Other critical issues in the management of alcohol dependence is psychosocial interventions. No long-term management is complete unless you use this. All the drugs I spoke of are useless unless you combine it with some form of psychosocial intervention. It starts at an individual level, where we have to look at individual factors in each patient that has probably led to the alcohol dependence, and use some form of counseling, even if we do not use a specific psychotherapy, some form of counseling to detect those factors, rationalize those factors, try and negate those factors to prevent relapse. We also need to look at group therapy interventions. These may be outpatient or inpatient. Outpatient is a little more difficult to manage because of attendance issues, compliance, etc. Inpatient group therapy is more viable for substance abuse because you usually have them in the ward for 2 or 3 weeks, and you could plan at least 6 or 8 sessions during those 2 or 3 weeks. Your approach could be psychoeducational. If you find there are specific issues amongst a group of 3 or 4 patients, whether it is interpersonal factors or whether it's conflicts with their parents or whether it is maybe just a novelty seeking from their point of view, you might address that. Also, sometimes you have to call the entire family and talk to them, because you may have a patient who's alcoholic, he's upset because the son is not doing well, he has a strained relationship with his wife, daughter and his relationship is not proper. So sometimes the entire family may have to be called and spoken to. One question which I'm often asked, madam even raised it, that what is good? Controlled drinking or total abstinence? I always remember when I gave my 3rd MBBS obstetrics viva, they asked me what is the most foolproof method of contraception. I said abstinence. So he said, very good, you're right. Same way, the only foolproof method to prevent drinking is abstinence. There is no other way out. Controlled drinking, there are some authorities that believe in it. There are some authorities that say controlled drinking works. There are studies, there is a Cochrane review on controlled drinking, but at least, I mean, from whatever I have been taught at KEM, elsewhere, what I have learnt in life, abstinence is the only way out. Also, marital therapy. We get n number of alcoholic patients who blame their wife for the drinking, and wives who blame the husband for their problems, you know. Yeah, it's there. So we need to address those issues as well, you know. If you don't address this and just give him disulfiram, tell him sab theek ho jayega, wife theek ho jayega, don't worry, negative won't happen. Or if you tell him naltrexone will take care of your life and your wife, no, it won't happen, you know. So you need to sort of control both, you know. And most importantly, educate everyone about the illness. You know. We have to tell them it's a medical problem. Why we are giving them medicines, why we are giving them therapy, why we are calling them for counseling, and what is the illness person and what the medicines do. If you don't do that, it won't help. Also, self-help groups like Alcoholic Anonymous and groups for the wives, if possible, yes, they should attend. Well, the acknowledgement here goes to my son. That's with his classmate. There's no relationship blooming there. It's just that, you know, this is because he's given me time off on a Sunday. Normally it's his time. I mean, I don't normally take up lectures on a Sunday, but I had to be here because I was invited. So acknowledgement goes off to him. That's my email. So if you want the slides, you know, you all have been frantically writing down. Don't do that. If you want the slides, just tell me. I'll send them to you. So all your writing so far has been a waste, you know. Yeah. Thank you.